Uh, I'll start
Okay.
just by introducing. Well, thank you for joining, Nancy. It's an honor for us, and I've got a few mates with me here. So I'm joining from Budapest in Hungary, and
Wow.
Colin's joining from Leighton Buzzard in the UK, and Henry
Nice.
is joining from Rhode Island in
You're, you're
your
down in the bottom
yeah,
right with the glasses? Oh,
yeah,
Henry, I see your name. Okay,
Henry,
Henry.
yeah, and then James is calling in from Lancaster. In the north of England. He was raised in a working town.
James,
Ro-
I have that same pink crystal light that's on your
Yes.
speaker. I love
Yes, a salt
those.
lamp. A salt lamp. Yes, it was a
Yeah,
gift.
salt
Yeah.
lamp.
Yeah, they're very restful,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yes, I have it actually in my dining room. I should probably plug it in.
Yeah, that might help.
Oh, somebody's doing. Oh, I have my amaretto cappuccino amaretto.
Are you joining us from Nashville?
I am. I am. I'm in
Thanks.
Nashville. I love Nashville. I've been here. It'll be 30 years in December. I can't believe it.
Wow.
So
Time
you
flies.
not quite go far back as Blonde on Blonde and Nashville Skyline. That was in the 60s, right?
Honey, it's on fire. It's crazy here. It's like Singapore.
Mm.
I turned a street the other day and I said, where the hell am I? I mean, it's just like glass buildings everywhere. It's the place is on fire. I don't know who has the money and who's coming in and what's going on, but I'm sort of slightly outside of the city. Well, actually, I'm totally in the city. I'm on the other side of Vanderbilt, and it's very
Yeah.
calm over here. I don't go downtown unless I'm taken.
Okay. Excellent.
Insane.
We've got your book here, Nancy.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you for supporting we writers.
yeah, excellent. So we're going to show a couple of extracts from that book. It's a very enjoyable book, and I just want to
Okay.
recap how you got started. I was obviously rereading it in preparation for this, so I know you were a model first, and you said the opening of the Fillmore East was the thing that changed your life. So do you want to talk
It
about?
was. Oh, we lost somebody.
Henry.
We lost Henry. Henry. Yes, I was it was like there you are, Henry.
Sorry about that.
I was uh, a model at Eileen Ford back in the 60s and early 70s, probably up until 71. And a friend of mine, of my then boyfriend, he was a guy who loaded in bands backstage. His name was Buffalo. And he had a big beard and he was missing a tooth. He was just a fabulous guy. And he said, you ought to come down to the back door. And back then, the guy who was on the back door was Michael Klempfer, who became years later very high up in the record world. So I would go down there with a couple of my model girlfriends, and we'd knock on the back door, and they go, "Yeah, come on in," and that's where I would see a lot of great bands, and that's where I met my first real boyfriend, who was Carl Radel,
Yeah.
great bass player, and he was there with the Mad Dogs and Englishmen, and my friend Buffalo said, "Why don't you have him back to your loft?" Back then, I had a fabulous floor through loft. Why don't you have him for dinner? And I mean, I'm a girl who'd never had maybe a glass of wine, who was a vegetarian. I did, carrot juice, and I said, sure, they can come tomorrow. I'll make them shrimp tempura. Well, little did I know that the buzzer rang, and coming up the stairs was like big heavy set one of the roadies carrying a box with Wonder Bread and bologna. They brought their own food, and behind him was another big guy carrying a tank. And I said, what's that tank? Is somebody like on oxygen? And he goes, no, baby, it's a nitrous oxide. And I went, but that's what a dentist uses. Anyway, they took over my loft. There was about 30 of them. And I remember Carl and Jim Keltner standing opposite my kitchen counter, watching me with a bottle of tequila going back and forth, and I'm like, my champion Zeus going, does anybody want any, carrot juice? And I think Rita Coolidge said, can I put vodka in it? And I said, sure, I guess so. So anyway, that was the first time I ever had a sip of tequila. So and then I didn't see Carl for like about 3 months. And then Leon came back through with his band after the Mad Dogs. He came with his album, the Leon Russell album. And Carl called me and I met him, and I don't know. I think they gave me psilocybin that night. I'm not sure what happened, but I wound up on the plane and going on tour with them and buying clothes, wherever we stopped. And I remember calling into Eileen Ford and she's saying, you've got a Sears and Roebuck catalog tomorrow. And I went, I don't think I'm going to make it. I'm in Cleveland. She said, get your ass back here. So I got on a night flight and made it to shaped my legs really quick and made it to so that's how I kind of was sucked into rock and roll.
Brilliant.
Mm.
And did you
Quite a
happen
welcome party.
did you happen to bump into Linda McCartney at the time? Because she was the official photographer at the Fillmore East for a while, but maybe it didn't overlap.
I don't think I did. She might have been there, she might have been there. I don't know. I don't remember meeting her then. The only time I ever remember meeting her was with Paul after Ringo and I were together.
Yeah, just talking of Linda, I think this book by her is a good companion to your book, Nancy. Between the two of them, they cover a lot of wonderful pictures of everyone under the sun.
Yeah, and she was a photographer. We're similar in that we're sort of like family photographers, It's not sort of posy, although Ringo would get, I called him my great poser because he loved the camera on him. I mean, we took a lot of pictures of each other. And I see my album cover up above your head there, John.
Yes, it's deliberately placed there for today. Yes, it's signed as well.
Yeah. Mediterranean behind.
Yeah,
I've recently just bought that album. I've just managed to find a copy of it online, so I've had it in my collection now for a few weeks.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's not a bad album.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's good fun.
We're gonna come to it. We're trying to go chronologically if possible. So let's just talk about the Layla album, Nancy. I mean, Carl must have been immensely proud of that album. It's such a masterpiece.
It's one of my go-to albums, the Layla album. If ever I'm down or I need an energy boost, I put on Layla. More so, I think, than just about any other album. Carl was incredibly proud of that album. And when he was on the road with Leon at the time, he was saying, he said, I just got back from doing Layla with Eric, and he said it's going to be coming out soon. And when it did, I just thought it was magnificent. I mean, I have never known musicians back during that day who could drink and drug and get on stage and play like gods. Yeah. I would say, like, they're stumbling up the stairs to get on the stage, and they get on there and they plug in, and they're magnificent. It's phenomenal.
The good old days.
The good old days.
It was always something that the Beatles always kind of prided themselves on not doing, wasn't it? They always used to say, we didn't used to get wrecked in the studio. We would record and get the music together, and then we would go off and have a smoke or whatever. But yeah. I'm guessing by the early 70s, maybe things had started to loosen up a bit more, and it was a bit more compatible.
Yeah. I mean, that wonderful film that came out last year sort of showed you them in the studio during that time where, if anything, they might have gone out and smoked a little joint or something. But that was pre-cocaine and except for John, of course, who was probably into heavier stuff at that time. But it didn't seem to stop them, though, Didn't seem to stop them.
John and I had the enormous pleasure to interview the wonderful May Pang last week.
I watched it.
Thank you.
I watched the May. Yeah, that's when I watched, you sent it to me, and I watched it and I said, hey, May, she's a great interview. She's a great interview.
And of course, the film is dropping today as we speak. Have you had the chance to watch it yet, Nancy?
I haven't seen it. I've seen parts of it. I talked to Chris O'Dell. Chris is in it. And Chris said, why weren't you in it? Because you hung out with her and John. And I said, it was think about their budget and them coming to Nashville or bringing me to LA or New York. I said, it just didn't work out budget wise. But I'm so happy for her. This is a long time coming. And from what I've seen, it looks really good.
Yeah.
Very emotional. I was crying at the end, and I don't often cry. So.
Oh, I've had many crying nights with May.
So Nancy, this is something you may not have seen before. This is a yellow vinyl.
Layla.
Yeah, a yellow vinyl edition, Europe only, which I picked it up in Nice about 3 or 4 years ago.
Never seen it. That is fantastic.
Could take a bite out of that, John. It looks really delicious.
Yeah, with a little vodka, we'll melt it down.
So what's your favorite track on the album, Nancy?
Well, I love Layla. I love Bell Bottom Blues. I love what's it called? Little Wing or there's that Bobby Whitlock sings it. It's just
Thorn Tree in the Garden at the end.
Yes. Okay. Oh my God, that there isn't a cut on that album that I don't love.
Yeah.
Not one. It's epic.
Yeah, I really like the whole of the first side. Way, Bell Bottom Blues, Keep on Growing. And on the 20th anniversary edition, there's Eric screams at the beginning of the intro to Keep on Growing, which is not on the original. I don't know if you've heard that version.
I've never heard that version.
He lets out a little scream just before they come in. Yeah.
It's just the most uplifting album and heart-wrenching album. It sort of takes you through a gamut of emotion, that album, and plus knowing the story behind it during that time, what was going on in the background. I'm sure you've all read Patty Boyd's book by now. And me being with Carl, and the whole thing was so hush hush, and then hanging out with Patty and Eric a little bit. It was pretty epic. And the book itself, that he got the idea for his love letters and his epic love story.
So was it quite embarrassing for the musicians to be in this situation with this love triangle going on?
I don't think so. I don't think so. They were all like sort of gaffer taped across the mouth, and Patty would show up for a couple of dates here and there. And when I first got together with Carl, he was talking about Layla, and he was showing me he had gone to the studio for the artist who did the cover, and he photographed the studio when they were looking for a cover for the album. And I have all of Carl's artwork, his photography, and the slides are amazing of this artist's studio and how they finally got to that cover. And he was saying, well, I can't tell you what her name is and blah, blah, blah. And I said, it's Patty Boyd. What are you, crazy? It's Patty Boyd. He goes, how do you know that? And I go, just because of everything else that I'm listening to, with you guys. Yeah.
I thought her name was Layla.
Yeah, it is. And God knows, I think he also called her, what do you call her? He had a nickname for her. I can't think of it right now. Anyway,
it was quite widely known about the relationship at the time then, was it, by people in the know?
After she left George, yeah. After she left George, it was widely known. But it went on for like a few years. She kept saying no, 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 and just kept getting more weird between her and George until finally she Eric just wore her down with this romance. And I mean, some of these letters, I'm sure you've read them in her book, a few that she's put in, they were just so romantic. I mean, you can't believe, anyone in this century was writing that kind of thing
Yeah.
to a woman.
So certainly at the time of Concert for Bangladesh, I know Eric was in pretty bad shape and they almost didn't get it to the venue. So I know you met George backstage there. Presumably you had front row tickets or something to the gig?
Well, Carl was playing bass with Klaus Foreman. So he was there and we were all staying in the same hotel. I think it was the on Central Park West, nice hotel. And we came in through backstage and I sat with all the wives. Maureen was one of them. In fact, in the film, you see me and Carl and Leon walking in the passageway to the stage, and right behind me is Ringo, which is who knew, right behind me. 2 years later, he would be my guy. He's looking very goth with dark black hair and a black velvet suit on. I'm going, oh, God, I didn't go through that with him. But yeah. And then Eric, I remember in the dressing room, he was sitting there and they were getting him up. But this again, the same thing. They got him up the stairs. He walked on the stage and he played like a god, Just I don't know how these guys did it. It's like in their DNA.
How stressed was George getting, waiting for Eric to arrive and waiting for Bob to show up? He must have been completely fried,
Probably. I mean, George was in his whole separate room, and the musicians kind of had like a couple of rooms that were like in the hallway, but George was sort of really sequestered in his own room, trying, with probably the promoters, the money, but it turned out to be so incredibly successful. Yeah. It was the seed that planted the tree for everybody else to follow, wasn't it?
Indeed. I love the story about how Bob was really excited afterwards, wasn't he? In the bar, apparently he was just going around saying, "Yeah, let's do that again, let's do it again," and he was really fired up about it after he'd been quite reluctant to appear, and then it was such a huge buzz, and he was just on cloud nine, to use a pun, after that.
It's so amazing. I don't know, I guess it's stage fright or whatever it might be, the insecurity of the human factor in these incredible men. But boy, put them on the stage and get them to play music. It's all about the music, and that's pretty much what takes them away and takes us all down that river.
Did you hang out with the Badfinger guys at all? It's another favorite band of mine.
Not until recently. What's his name? The little guy.
Joey Molland.
Joey Molland. I've been around Joey. I see him in Nashville. He comes to Nashville a lot because we have a mutual friend, Richard Courtney, who he always comes in when Richard has something. He's an incredibly wonderful man who is in real estate, but he gives back a lot, be it cancer, housing, habitat for, and he brings Joey in, and he had on Hippie Radio, he had a show where he would interview people, and he always bring Joey in, and Joey is he's a character. I really, really like him and his wife, and I liked his wife who died. She was lovely.
Kathy, yeah.
We all got to meet Joey in Liverpool 18 months ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he's a lovely guy.
He's a leprechaun, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's definitely got fairy blood in him. He's a leprechaun. He's got so much energy.
Yeah.
Excellent. So should we move on to 1974 when John Lennon famously introduced you to Ringo and you were his poker partner on that famous.
Yes, yes. John was. It was the famous. Harry Nilsson, he was producing Harry Nilsson for Pussycats.
Yeah.
And he had rented Peter Lawford's house at the beach. I don't know if May touched on this at all with you guys. And I had been hanging out with John and May a lot because when I left Carl things started getting hard with Carl, I moved to LA, and I'd been on several sessions that Carl had done with John from the rock and roll album, etc. And All Things Must Pass. And so John said, well, you're going to hang out with me in May. So I'm going to take care of you because there's a lot of wolves in this town. And I said, okay. So I would go and hang with them, you know, be it a burrito on the street, or it was very funny. He was very low key during that time. And so he would keep his car in my garage when they went out of town. So anyway, May said, and I was working with David Bowie at the time. I was doing all the publicity for Main Man. And May said, oh, it's Mal Evans's birthday. We're going to have a big party at the beach. Come down. And I said, okay. So I went down there before I had to go do something with David Bowie. And it was just, you know, children, musicians, and I walked past this one room, the sunroom, and Jesse had David, and it was, a couple of the guys were in there playing poker. And Jesse had said, Nan, come in here and play poker with us. And I said, well, I don't have much time. And Ringo said, well, come on over. He said, you can play my hand with me. And I went, oh, it's Ringo. Now, I had known that Ringo was estranged from his wife at the time.
Right.
And I was one of the few people that knew why. So I went, oh, okay. So I went and sat down next to him, and it was very sweet. He was like very schoolboy, high schooly, you know, like nudging me and going, oh, and you know, like poking me. And I'm thinking, you know, I think he likes me. He's really cute, you know. So, and then I said, well, I got to go, guys. Goodbye. And then I went off, I don't know, to the Universal Amphitheater to set something up for Bowie. And so a few months passed, and John said, bring my car. I'm back in town. I'm at the Beverly Wilshire. And that's when I went up and knocked on the door, and Ringo opened it. And May, and he goes, my poker partner. And I went, that's right, I am your poker partner. And he just latched on to me, and I'm looking over at John and going, and he's going, and I'm going, I'm being set up. So we go downstairs to have dinner, and he said, will you sit next to me? And he's like, he's holding my hand like a schoolboy, and he's rubbing my fingers, and I'm going, oh, well, I don't know. I guess he's my date for dinner. And I go to the ladies' room, and May comes with me, and she said, he's been driving us crazy to meet you. And I said, really? I said, oh my God, I had no idea. She said, you know, it's always like, what about Nancy? What about Nancy? She said, so John said, well, when you bring my car, well, I'll bring her up. And I said, oh, okay. So we went to the studio, and he was doing vocals. The Ringo album was just breaking. He was flying high. And it was just sort of like the first single was out, and I think this was the Goodnight Vienna album. And so we were doing vocals. He was singing Goodnight Vienna, and John was helping him with the vocals because he wrote the song. So yeah, I was set up. I was set up and pleasantly surprised that I really liked him, even though I thought he was short. I just like taller guys, but he was, didn't matter.
Had you been a Ringo fan back in the Beatlemania days, or anything like that? Was there? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You know, in my bathroom, I put up the Abaddon poster. You know, the 4 pictures that came in that album. Those wonderful Abaddon psychedelic photos. You know, I put them up in my bathroom in New York. But it's really funny. May and I were talking. I don't know where we were. We've done so much together, and I said, you know, it's just really funny. After Ringo and I were together, we're laying in bed, and he looks over at me. He said, who was your favorite Beatle? And I went, oh my God, it wasn't him. And I'm going, well, he said, it was Paul, wasn't it? It was Paul. All the girls like Paul. And I said, well, actually, no, it was John. And he said, John. And I said, yeah. I said, I like John. And May said, I did the same thing with John. He leaned over and he said to me, he goes, who was your favorite Beatle? And she goes, well, it was Ringo. He goes, Ringo? So yeah, I was Paul, I thought was just too pretty and cutesy. George was, I don't know, he just didn't do it for me. But John was sort of mentally, it was, which is what I loved about John. He was like a big brother.
Yeah.
And did Ringo keep playing "The Most Beautiful Girl in the World" by Charlie Rich on the jukebox?
Oh my God, you know that story. Yes, he did. A few nights later, we went to the Fiddler, which is like right down the street from the studio, and it would stay open till like 3 in the morning and serve fish and chips and stuff, and they were pretty well oiled by then, and May and I were. I'm more of a caregiver, and I did cocaine. I smoked some dope, but after watching what was going on around me, I didn't want to lose control, because when you watch a lot of other people losing control, I'm going to drive, So anyway, we're sitting there, and Richard goes up to the Wurlitzer, and he presses Charlie Rich's "Beautiful Girl in the World," and he comes back and he stops and he goes, "I'm going to play it again." I went, okay. So then he went and asked for quarters, and so he finally just sat down in front of the Wurlitzer and put his head up against the speaker. Yeah. And I looked at John and I said, "He's still in love with his wife." And he said, "Nah, he'll get over it." He said, "Give him a chance. He's a good lad." And I went, okay. Yeah, it's pathetic.
He famously covered the Roger Miller classic "Husbands and Wives" on "Goodnight Vienna," which was, I sort of read that as his kind of goodbye to Maureen in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's also another song called "Crying." Don't it make you feel like crying watching good love slowly die?
Yeah.
And that was really the goodbye song that he wrote with Vinnie Poncia.
Yeah, that was on Rotor Graveur, right?
Yes, exactly. That's a great song. That's actually like I don't know why somebody hasn't picked that up for a country song. That'd be such a great country song.